Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon, and I am your host this morning. I'm also the creator and the moderator of TheChocolateLife.com. And we got a wonderful hour coming up in front of us. We're going to be talking to two of the co-founders of a craft chocolate business, and we're going to be talking about setting up the factory. Pro tips that you might want to know when you're creating your own chocolate factory. And what I want to do is I want to introduce right now Christian Tyler. Hey, Christian, good morning. How are you this morning?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing
Yeah,
great today. Here
great.
we
And
are in the chocolate factory.
yeah, no, just a quick note. Jessica just arrived. She's going to be heading to the back to join the live stream in just a minute. But, Christian, you were on about 15 or 16 months ago talking about co-packing and, how do you go and select a co-manufacturer? And I understand from you that that got a whole lot of interest. People have contacted you up afterwards. And what I wanted to do in this particular case is that since then, you have set up a craft chocolate manufacturing business and facility here in Arizona. So I'm out in front at the retail portion, and you're in the back with Jessica. Good morning, Jessica. Um, in the back of the factory. And what I wanted to do is the Cacao Consulting is in the business of working with other companies and helping them not only in their formulation and new product development, but getting them through startup co-manufacturing. And you're in this manufacturing business. What are some things that you learned? And that's what I want to focus on today. What are some of the things that you learned in the course of setting up this factory? Things that other people should know when they're setting up their factories. So, y'all good with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's some pretty useful information because there's a lot you go through in the process.
I'm sure there is. I'm going to be adding Jessica's name to this and to the live stream, just so that everybody's got it. So please wait just a second. There we go. So yay. So the number one thing, if you can for me, please set up number one where you decided to set up the factory and some of the decisions that went through to picking this particular location. And then can you set up for us how much space you have and the way it's organized? Because as I say in the post for today's live stream, before a bag is opened, before a bean is cleaned, right, and sorted, before there is the opportunity to roast a particular bean, there are thousands of decisions that go into the creation of this facility. So let's start with, physically where you're located. We're in Prescott, Arizona, right? But can you please go and share with us the decisions that made to pick this particular place and how it's organized?
I think we should start with probably why we decided to open the chocolate factory, because that's sort of the bigger picture here. When we started off, we had a consulting firm that we didn't really envision doing anything but R&D work, production consulting. I traveled quite extensively for clients to countries like Ecuador to develop products and get them on production lines. And we just thought that business was going to continue and continue about until the time of the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, we got really just hit with so much business because of all of these companies that were getting all the free money from the government through the PPP programs. And they were investing lots of money in R&D. And we saw a whole wave of that come to us. The unfortunate part was that we couldn't find co-manufacturers to take on the work. Nobody was taking on the small scale new ideas any longer. Most of our partners that were doing that were just refusing new projects that we brought to their doorstep. And so that really sunk in for us that for Cacao Consulting to continue to grow, it needed a partner for co-manufacturing. And in that process, Jessica and I conceived the idea of creating the Orinoco Chocolate Co., which is our brand of craft chocolate that we're really passionate about. And we created our line just to be a really special craft chocolate line, but it's also a plant that we built with the intention that we would be able to help a lot of our clients from Cacao Consulting get their product onto a production line.
So I still want to go to, okay, why did you pick the location that you picked in Prescott? What were the determining factors? Because I think that when many people think about setting up their workshop, whether you want to call it a workshop or a factory, one of the first decisions they go to is, number one, how much space do I think I need in order to do this? And then number two, what are the factors that are going to determine actually the physical location, right? Given the fact that this is how much space I need. And so I'd like to go in and talk about those two questions before we continue.
So I think a very important part of us determining what space we needed was a few factors, one of which is when you're starting a factory, always plan for growth. So it's really easy to think, okay, today I need around 1,500 square feet. And you're not taking into account that maybe in 6 months, maybe a year, that you're going to be doubling or tripling the space you need depending on the volumes you're doing and the machines you'll be bringing in. So that was a big factor for us where, hey, at least we need 2,500 square feet. We're open to up to 5,000 square feet, which will make our lives easier in terms of growth and expansion. So that was one factor. The other one, of course, is when you're thinking of chocolate machinery, you need the electrical needs to support that. So we live in a tiny mountain town here. There's not a lot of commercial real estate available. And we knew we needed 3-phase 380, 3-phase 480, and it wasn't readily available in a lot of the spots we were looking at with the size restraints. Of course, another factor is the most important part. We're in Arizona, and even though we're up at elevation, we're a mile high here, we also need to keep in mind that during the summer months, it gets pretty hot. So we need, of course, functioning HVAC, and you need air conditioning rather than evaporative cooling or swamp coolers in order to maintain food safety. So that was another very difficult thing that we encountered when looking for the home for our factory was what has existing HVAC. We found a lot of spaces that could have been viable, and they had an existing evaporative cooler, and we soon learned that it is extremely expensive to install your own HVAC unit. We were getting quotes of around $35,000. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you're looking to start a chocolate factory, make sure that there's a functioning AC rather than evaporative cooling.
So it sounds like from what you're saying is that this whole question of a working HVAC system, there are two parts of it. A lot of that has to do with the capacity of the HVAC system. I'm thinking in many locations, unless you're in a restaurant location, they're looking for, for an HVAC load, which is pretty constant 24 hours a day, right? But if you're in a chocolate factory and all of a sudden you turn a roaster on inside of it, the reactive load on the HVAC goes up tremendously. And so if you have something which is kitted out just for a plain retail location, then perhaps the HVAC might not be sufficient for the particular work that you're doing. Is that a fair representation?
Absolutely. And I would highly recommend that rather than taking whoever's selling you on the space in some situations, it might be the real estate agent, in other situations it might just be the builder, do bring in a professional to test your HVAC system and make sure that it is functioning as it says it is. That was something that we encountered and has been a big annoyance during our time with our factory. Luckily, we went through the bulk of that during the winter time. But do make sure that you bring in a third party to test and that it can handle the load that you anticipate needing during the hot months.
Yeah, the fact about it is there's a lot of dishonest people in this world that will try to sell you a false bill of goods. It's really important that, even if it seems like a little bit of money, like we paid for an electrician, costs about $300 for him to do just sort of a general inspection and make sure that we were going to get the electricity that we need. Well worth it. An HVAC tech would have cost us about $1,200. that would have saved us a lot of grief that we unnecessarily went through. We were trusting in the real estate agent, and so luckily those problems are getting remedied at the moment. But an HVAC system functioning in a small building, ours is 4,500 square feet. It's going to take 360 days for the materials and everything to be here ready for that system to work. So there's at least a year lead time for that. And so luckily
Wow.
we're working through temporary smaller units that keep the space cooled. But what a major factor to consider for a chocolate factory. How it affects you as far as being able to make a good finished product, controlling your environment is extremely important. And I guess the other thing that came up for us was floors. Like, we had no idea getting into this how expensive flooring could actually get to on a commercial level. You know, the more DIY stuff you can do, the more you can save yourself. Sometimes in some places you're not allowed to. Contractors are required by, say, the company that you're renting from. But if you can do stuff DIY, a lot of these jobs like epoxying the flooring, it's not that difficult. We were pretty shocked with a quote that we received originally. This company came to us as a local company in the town we're at, and they wanted $65,000 to do our flooring. Raw materials cost us about $13,000 in epoxy paint. We found another company that was able to do floor grinding, which we discovered after doing a lot of research was the most important part of all, is that you get a really level, you get your floors entirely level so that they're flat, so that you don't have say water or another liquid running to one side versus another, unless you've designed it that way with floor drains. Getting it very flat and level before you lay epoxy is very important. And so we learned that. It was a fun project. We saved ourselves a lot of money, but flooring can be the biggest expense. And I think a lot of craft chocolate makers just sort of romanticize the beautiful sell me machines coming in and all that, and they set up their budget based on that, and they don't think about all these other things that are actually much more of a cost than the actual machinery in many cases.
So I want to generalize at least one of the components that the aspects that you talked about, which is if you were buying a home, you would want an independent inspector's report. You'd want an appraisal, somebody to walk through and making sure there wasn't mold in the walls and rot in the flooring and other kinds of issues, right? So one of the things that you're going to want to make sure that you budget for is you're going to want to budget for independent inspectors. Much like you, before you bought a used car, you'd want to send it to a garage that you trusted in order to have some sort of independent assessment of the condition of the car. So that's number one. So with respect to flooring, I know that one of the things that's in your future is getting certified for good manufacturing processes, so GMP certification. And how is that different from just the local health department? Because I think was that local health department okay with, just plain concrete floors and washable walls? Or is the floor that you put on a part of this longer term business need that you saw that you wanted to take care of?
Yeah, every health inspector for every county is a little bit different. It just, it varies from county to county. We could have gotten away with a lot less than we had done, but we were envisioning a future of GMP, HACCP, BRCGS, and SQF, right, and other types of.
Could you BRCGS? That means.
I don't even know exactly what the whole acronym means, but it's another one of these more advanced, expensive food safety audit programs that you can get. And there's a lot of benefits.
So Okay, before you continue, I just want to point out that just really, really quickly to everybody is that I do have a post for every single one of these Chocolate Life Live live streams. Here is the one for today. And what I will do is I will put a link to BRCGS down below after we get done with this. So people are looking at BRCGS or something like that for an independent food safety standard, they can go and take a look at it. So just wanted to interrupt
So,
there. I'm sorry,
you know,
Christian, go ahead.
frankly speaking, these big acronyms are more like pie in the sky at the moment, because the audits are very expensive. We're mostly focused on GMP at the moment. And the reason we're focused on that is just because it's the lowest cost. We're already following the norms. We're actually following even more advanced food safety norms than that. But it just puts us into a place that we're prepared when we onboard a client who has the funding and the volume to be able to support these expensive food safety audits, because they're very expensive. As a craft chocolate company, I think we would ideally like to be able to enter into, selling into markets like in the Middle East and to Japan. And so a lot of these kinds of things are important. A lot of them eliminate, say, glass from your factory and other things that can be dangerous. But yeah, it's very important. The larger scale you work with food, the more dangerous it can be.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a point there is if we go back to your point, Jessica, in terms of anticipating future growth, one of the anticipations that you have is you're doing new product, not just new product development, but you're now actually doing the startup co-manufacturing. And if you want to enter into these relationships, things like GMP, perhaps HACCP, BRCGS, these are things that your clients are going to be coming to you and saying, we need these food safety certifications because the people that we plan to sell to, they're going to demand them from us. And so if you were just doing, craft chocolate under your own brand and you weren't thinking about that kind of retail distribution, maybe it's not quite so important. Or do you think that the discipline, Jessica, do you think that the discipline of going through these efforts is worth the effort, even if you're not going to go and apply for the certifications?
I certainly do. I think it not only eliminates, especially down the road when you are selling, to larger retailers, regardless of whether or not they require these food safety audits, it eliminates any potential kinks in manufacturing that could cause issues or returns for you in the future. So it's always good to have good practices in place that protect you from that, to make sure there's no metal getting into things, there's no hair, pieces of glass, anything like that. And these are all things that are very succinctly outlined in these food safety audit programs that you can just easily implement on your own and just take the worry out of it.
Great. Yeah, I want to do a quick reset. Go ahead, Christian. I'm sorry.
There's a lot of things that go on in big chocolate factories and big food manufacturing facilities that people are very much unaware of. Like, I've heard stories of companies getting blocks of cocoa liquor that contained a whole entire broom handle in it. I mean, a whole broom handle. So there's things that can happen, and when you're working on a large scale and you have say large objects and large doors, tanks, it's easier for larger things to fall into those larger doors. And, it's a lot of us think it's like, oh my God, how could they let that happen? Well, be surprised what can happen when you're working on a large scale like that. We're pretty thankful. We're a pretty small batch factory still. We're not really looking to have 5,000 kilo refiners or anything insane like that here. We're working on very small batches that typically are about 150 pounds max.
Gotcha. So I want to do a quick reset very quickly and acknowledge some of the people who put a comment telling me where they're connecting in the world. By the way, if you're watching live, please go into the comments and let us know where in the world that you're connecting from, and I'll do a quick shout out here. I'm always interested in knowing where people are connecting from, and I think that people who are watching like to do that. And so I want to acknowledge Lynn Bishop. Lynn is connecting from Panama. She's a friend of the channel, and she's a friend of both Jessica and Christian, myself, and excited to hear what you're in the room and what they have to say. And I'm looking forward to having Lynn join us on one of these in the future. Lynn, give us a thumbs up if you'd like to join us, because you have a small batch chocolate manufacturing project in a producing country, in Panama. And so it'd be interesting to see the difference between what Christian is doing and what Jessica are doing and what you're doing and other people. So that's great. I want to say hello to Thomas, who's connecting from New Jersey. He's been a long time friend of mine. I've probably known him for, 15 years at least, through the chocolate community in New York City. Also, a big shout out to Mike King from Encore Coffee Company in Kansas City. I had a chance to visit with Mike when I was traveling from Boston here to Prescott, visit his factory, and I'm going to be writing about it. It's going to be my next post for the cross-country craft chocolate odyssey that I'm going to be doing in the next couple of days, probably over the weekend. And then Lynn says, yay, she wants to be a part of this. Great. I will reach out to you and we'll talk about that. So having gone through that, people, this episode of the Chocolate Life Live is supported by members of the Chocolate Life, both the free members and the premium members. So go to thechocolatelife.com and give us a shout out there. You can join, or if you're watching on YouTube, go and like and comment and subscribe. It helps grow the channel. So Brent, Brent from Indigenous Chocolate on the Florida Panhandle, super excited about this chat. We are less than 1 month away from moving into our new micro factory. Well, that's a huge milestone, and congratulations on making the leap. I'm interested in knowing what you think micro is, just to get an idea. Just if you have questions or comments, things that you thought you wish you knew before you started, that's part of what it is that we're doing, things to go on, things to think about as you're moving forward. Having said all that, so Jessica and Christian, one of the things, that, I encounter here is when I moved in is you made the decision to be vegan, gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, and peanut-free. So how did that decision so this is not just your new product development clients and co-manufacturers, this is what Orinoco is doing. So both sides of the business. How does making that decision when it comes to the allergens that you're going to allow into the factory, how did that affect the entire design? So you've got this floor plate, which is rectangular with a back room, right? With a front entrance into a shared space, right? And so the retail is up front. We'll talk about what you think about the importance of retail. You know what? And I realize I'm doing this, then I'm not here. So I'm really interested in knowing how the allergen decision affected the layout of the space, what it is you need to do with respect to GMP and how that works, how you solved the problem, and how it relates to the machinery that you decided to use for your production work.
Well, I guess to start with, if you're vegan as a chocolate factory, it's a lot easier, really, for storing ingredients, things like that, and all that the health departments will put you through. And that's just because, like, if we were processing, say, dairy or something like that, creams and things like that, we'd have to go through a lot more with the health department. There would be a lot more as far as refrigeration requirements. So that added to it a lot. I don't think that anybody should put gluten in their chocolate to begin with. That's an allergen that's pretty widespread. The future is looking not so good for the gluten market. The peanut market as well. Not to say that there's not good peanuts out there, but airlines did take them off of airlines for a reason. Those flights that had to turn back to the airport weren't too fun. So, it was just a little bit of logic involved with it. As far as soy goes, I mean, with chocolate, you typically have soy and soy lecithin, and we didn't really feel like having that particular product in the factory either, because we don't like the taste of it. So, just by a sequence of decisions based on what we liked in chocolate, what we wouldn't tolerate in chocolate, and what we felt was best for overall consumer safety. We went down that path, and we chose nuts that we're willing to work with that are generally safe for most people. Almonds is what we primarily process. We process some hazelnuts here. The nut that we're sort of on the fence with, but we still process, is cashews. That seems to be one that a lot more allergies are forming around. We do get people from time to time that will, honestly tell us how bad their nut allergy is and how they have to carry an EpiPen with them. And I'm sure there's a need for the complete removal of nuts for some of these lines, and I know there's a market for it. We've just been trying to really carefully make those decisions. And as well, as far as nuts go, we use the cleanest of the nuts that we can find. We have, chosen from specific orchards and not just from, consolidators of nuts.
So in terms of layout of our factory, at the end of the day, we know a lot of people, and we ourselves have some food allergies. So we just really wanted to create chocolate that everyone could eat. And that extends to our co-manufacturing as well. It's nice to have products to be able to produce products for our clients that are safe from the most common allergens. In terms of layout of the factory, it didn't particularly change the machinery choices or the layout of our factory, other than, like Christian said, our food safety audits are pretty simple because we don't have any temperature control sensitive products here. We're not doing ganaches with any dairy, anything like that. One thing that we do mandate in our factory is if you're in the back room eating your lunch, or if you're in the front room, having a snack when you're working the shop, is we don't let anyone eat any gluten. Like, you can't bring a traditional sandwich with you. And it's again, to keep that just really high level of food safety and cross-contamination safety. Gluten is one of those things that it's easy to contaminate everything else. So we want to make it safe for celiacs here as well.
Gotcha. So what I want to do, if I can, real quickly, because I'm up front and you guys are in the back, what I can do is I can move my camera and show them sort of the barrier that you're using. I'm not going to be able to, I've got my background out of focus and all that kind of stuff. So that's, a fairly interesting and I think fairly non-traditional kind of barrier. Most people would think that, I'm going to put a stub wall and glass between the front and the back, and you've decided on this movable curtain. I mean, were there some specific technical reasons, or just was it a cost reason which said, let's go with that?
There were a few reasons, one of which is you will soon learn as you are building a chocolate factory that you need to pull a lot of permits if you're going to do any sort of alteration work to the existing structure. And putting a big wall there was another big one that we would have had to get lengthy approval from our city and have additional fire safety approval for. So the wall there didn't, for us, make a lot of sense at the time. We wanted to get open, we wanted to get producing, and we still wanted to be producing in a safe way. So that particular curtain worked great for us. It's food safe. It's treated with the highest level of fire retardant, which makes our fire crew happy here. And it also allows people to see into the back, so they can see when they enter the shop what we're doing in the back and the manufacturing process, which is really unique. And also from a food safety perspective, as well as a cost perspective, not having glass there is also really helpful for us. We don't have to worry about any glass breaking, and therefore potentially getting into any ingredients or finished products. And it costs way less than it would to install a big glass wall.
Yeah, glass or even a structure wall, we would have spent at least 60, 70, 80 grand on a structure like that, even if it was a really light structure. That curtain really was a great savings. I think it cost us like a couple $1,000, something like that. And it served its purpose. We're also, we built this factory inside of a retail mall in the slowest, deadest mall in America. It's literally a mall that's in the list of the slowest, deadest malls in America. So we got manufacturing space at a pretty good price, and we had to think about the runway for a business. And typically a startup business isn't going to get a lot of business credit until about year 3. So we planned out a runway for our business, thinking that about 3 years of occupancy in a rental space is about what you need before you can get, say, an SBA loan or a private commercial real estate mortgage that can get you moving forward with ownership of something of your own. So that was a pretty important part of our planning, was that we do something temporary with that wall, not knowing really the future of the deadest mall in America.
Right. And I want to interject something here, which is that this kind of structure is one that can be set up inside a much larger structure. You've done it to partition the front from the back. So the public area from the area where you are going to enforce sort of the rules of GMP. You cross that barrier, I notice, and you have to have a hairnet, you have to have a beard net. If you don't have footwear, which is only worn inside that, you need to put booties on and things like that. And you enforce this, I mean, people may or may not be able to hear that, but there is some maintenance work going on, and I can hear people. But even the people who are in there temporarily working on any maintenance task, or if there are factory tours or anything like that, everybody has to take advantage of that. But for example, if what it is that you wanted to do is you wanted to store your cocoa beans in the factory space, that you could put a wall up like this, right? Go all the way to the ceiling, and you'd have something which was an effective barrier. For example, if they were contaminated with cocoa moths, you'd be able to contain the moth infestation. Or if you're doing something which which generated a lot of dust, for example, something like a cracker and winnower, you could isolate the cracker and winnower into a space within the much larger space, right, and be able to contain what it is that's going on. So it's an interesting approach to go and consider for people. Before we go, I want to do a couple of things. So Brent from Indigenous Chocolate, and Brent, I'm really interested from an Indigenous chocolate approach, what beans you intend to be using. Are you going to be using beans which are harvested by indigenous tribes? Really curious to know how you plan to implement the indigenous in your name. And you said micro is less than a 100 kilogram melanger. That's generous from craft chocolate terms. I think most people, when they think of micro, will think of anything of 20 pounds or less. But you've got a 100 kilo melanger, and so I'm glad that you're thinking at that scale, because I think you need to be at that scale in order to be able to approach something like profitability, or at least cash flow positiveness in reality. I'd like to say hello to Mark and Yuri from Blue Spruce in Kittredge, Colorado. Mark, I'm in Arizona, so I'm actually 1 hour behind you in Colorado. It's only 9:30 here. No longer in New York City, so I'm not 3 hours ahead or 2 hours ahead. And then I'd like to give a shout out to Fouad Mohammed Abu Bakr, who is in London, who is part of, I believe, the Gano Cocoa Marketing Company, if I recall correctly. He's in London getting ready to attend the FCC. The FCC is the Federation of Cocoa Commerce. The FCC is responsible, or actually oversees, almost 100% of exports out of West Africa. Basically, if you want to take cocoa out of Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire, it's done on an FCC contract, which requires that your business be domiciled in London, or at least in the UK. Just a quick background there. And Fouad, please correct me if I've got that wrong. And then also from Lynn, who has the interesting question here after saying she's come and visited. She'd love to know what your very favorite piece of machinery is and why it's your very favorite piece of machinery.
I would say probably our one-shot depositor is my favorite piece of machinery. And when we first got it, it was sort of like the crying baby in the room, where it just needed a lot of attention. We had to just coddle it just so, otherwise we wouldn't be getting the efficiency that we wanted. And this is a machine that we purchased from Brazil. Christian is luckily fluent in Portuguese. I'm not, and that has allowed us to have this machine and be able to receive support in Portuguese, which I think otherwise, if it were just me alone, it would be a huge uphill battle using this machine. But it's been a big learning experience, and we have, I think, just the appreciation through the learning of how to take care of this machine and how to actually use it hasn't been as straightforward as a machine in which we would have received support in English. But for that reason, it's been my favorite because it's sort of been the challenge, and it's been exciting to learn how to really get maximum efficiency out of that machine.
So Christian, do you agree, or do you have another favorite, or would like to add to what it is that Jessica said?
I love the OSD. It's been it was a love-hate relationship in the beginning. Honestly, this is the advice I have for every chocolate maker: is trust your engineer. Like, don't think you know more than your engineer. Like, I'm serious. So many people fall into that trap of like they don't want to trust what the engineer says. The engineer knows their machine better than anybody. So listen to what they say, give them an opportunity, give them patience, and that's how you're going to get the results you want. We worked really hard battling with the one-shot depositor. I mean, it was just a constant battle, and we finally got to where we needed to be. I feel like I can operate that machine better than anything now, but you really got to put in the time for the education. It's really important, and I think that's kind of part of the reason why Clay's working on classes, one-shot depositor classes.
So I want to, yes, so for people who are here, we are going to be offering one-shot classes on using one-shot depositors here in a production environment. I think we're going to try to offer the first class in August. So people can come in and over the course of 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, get an opportunity to get an in-depth introduction on why a one-shot depositor might be an interesting option compared with putting a depositing head on the existing the depositing head on the existing machine, on an existing tempering machine. So just wanted to let people know about that. What I want to go and just generalize, if I can, Christian, and have you explain for me, if you can, is when you say trust your engineer, what I think you're saying is that what you want to do is you want to develop a good relationship with the people who are going to be providing you customer service from the company you're buying your equipment from. Is that what you're saying in terms of trust your engineer?
Yeah, I would really encourage anyone to develop a good relationship with the company you're getting your equipment from the beginning, and just talk to other people that bought a machine from them. That's what we did before we made the decision on which one we wanted. Is we asked people questions. How was it working with the engineer? Did they fix your problems? And the ones that said they left us for months without support, and we just quickly eliminated those. I'm pretty blessed because I have a really good relationship with a lot of Brazilian engineers. I speak good Portuguese. I lived in Brazil for a good portion of my life, and I know how to get things resolved. I know how to work with them, and we're getting the results we want. It's taken a little while, and just communication and online trainings and things like that, but really just putting our trust in them. We definitely saw design flaws in some machines. Like there's a tempering machine we have, and we recognize its shortcomings, and we still work with it. You know what we have to do to keep it working. We have other machines that we like to work with better. But that one-shot depositor, it was a great starter machine. We're probably going to get another one soon that will allow us to deposit even faster. So we love one-shot depositing. It's I think what we like to do best.
So what I would like to do is say is that so before I get that, I would have to say that so people who know me and have a history with me know that I represented FBM in the United States and around the world for many, many years. And that relationship ended just as COVID hit. There was no relationship it was not a causal relationship. It just coincidental. But one of the things that I saw that led to the most frustration among people who purchased FBM equipment is that they were trying to get all of their customer service via email, right? And so, especially if there was a time difference, like I'm on the West Coast, so there's of the United States, so there's at least an 8 or 9 hour time difference between where I am and where Milan in Italy is. And trying to negotiate a customer service relationship via email over a 9 hour time difference is pretty much untenable, right? Even if the person at the other end speaks perfect English, right, and understands what it is that you're doing. So my feeling about what it is that you have to say there, Christian, is very, very, very much the case. Before you place an order for the machine, then what you should think about doing is you should think about getting on board with the customer service people and asking them questions about the machine that you're getting before you do it, to see an understanding. If they're not going to support you in the sales process, right, if you're in the process of supporting your decision to making a buying decision, then chances are they're not going to support you after you've made the buying decision. So I think it's a really, really important thing to consider. So the next question I like is, you decided to go with a one-shot machine as opposed to go with a tempering machine with either a traditional depositing head from the manufacturer or one of these really nice new depositing heads from Daniel Fairbank at Fairbank Engineering. So what was it about the one-shot depositor that said to you guys, yes, we know that the combination of a tempering machine and a one-shot is going to be more expensive, but it made an enormous amount of sense for us to go ahead and do that? Okay. So, okay. So hold on. So Jessica, I can't hear you. Jessica, I can't hear you.
About the ability to make filled products. We were planning in the future. Oh, okay.
Okay, so Jessica, for some reason, the connection has become pretty unstable. So could you start? Oops, and now we've lost them. All right, so let's see if they come back. And what we'll do is, while we're waiting for them to reconnect, what I will do is I will get a response from Brent, who says, as there are several definitions for what indigenous means, we're leveraging the originating or occurring in a particular place description as opposed to the native description. So we plan to take a different approach to purchasing large amounts of beans from limited growing locations with a small amount of beans from many different locations. Their plan is to focus on 2 ingredients, single origin from around the world with no inclusions. They also do bean to bonbon. And okay, so Christian and Jessica, you've just come back, right, in my live stream, but it doesn't look like your camera or your microphone are connected. So please make sure that is happening. Or what you can do is just walk out front, and what you can do is you can join my shot, and that will make sure that there's not a problem with what's going on. So please go to that. So Brent, it's really, really interesting. I think that's what you plan to go about doing. I think that it speaks to sort of the mainstream of what people think that the craft chocolate movement is all about. And I'm also excited that, what it is that you've decided to do is that you've decided to focus not just exclusively on chocolate bars, but you're also going to be working with yay, there you are. You're going to be working and making bonbons and other products. So if I do a little bit of market research, so like the #1 flavor in the world is salted caramel. And so if you're you're not offering a salted caramel product for your customers, then you're losing a market opportunity. And so doing bonbons, or in this particular case, is adding inclusions to your chocolate bars. I know that you want to focus on 2 ingredient, right? Just plain single origin chocolate. But my advice, as somebody who's watched people succeed and watched people struggle, if I look at the people who have succeeded through the pandemic over the course of the last couple of years, it would be people who started off with a very, very strict approach to single origin 2 ingredient, who said, nah, I need to appeal to a larger audience. And you're going to try to hold out. I understand, but we will see what happens. It's going to be really, really interesting. So this is an interesting question. So Christian and Jessica, let's do this first. All right. So how has the mix of products? Number one is, how important is the ability to sell at retail to you? But how has the mix of products you're producing changed? I mean, the retail operation opened last November, sort of mid-November, just before the Thanksgiving holiday. How is the mix of products you're currently offering changed as a result of, we have this idea and it hits the local market, and the local market goes thumbs up, or not quite so interested?
So we initially, when we opened our factory, the whole plan was purely manufacturing as well as co-manufacturing. And when we ended up signing the lease here in the mall space, part of our lease agreement was we needed to maintain something available to the public, as we are occupying a space that is a larger space here in the mall and is in prime location. So we agreed to that, and last minute we scrambled together to put together a retail store, and we were like, okay, yeah, this will just be a distraction, but we're going to do it. And the retail has ended up being a really core part of our business model. We love meeting our community through that way and hearing what people have to say about our chocolate, introducing a lot of people for what is their first time trying real chocolate, and educating them about it has been super fulfilling for us. And as Clay alluded to, it's also allowed us to do sort of beta testing, if you will, on products that we are releasing through our store, kind of helping us to determine if we want to add that to our permanent lineup for the Orinoco line. So our store allows us to just have a lot of creativity in terms of, hey, today I feel like making a snickerdoodle white chocolate for the holiday time. And it wouldn't necessarily be something that I would put under our Orinoco branded line, but it's really fun to be able to make and formulate and have available to the public. It also has allowed us to figure out what is really exciting and popular to people. Hint, coffee. So it's kind of given us a testing grounds from which to plan our future product lineup.
I guess one of the other things that it's also done is it's reinforced our investment strategy with the one-shot depositor. In that, we're passionate about our bean to bar. We even have really beautiful bar molds that we love, and we love making chocolate bars, and that's what we eat. But the bean to bar market is not nearly as big as the bean to bonbon market. Our data shows that in our retail store, 70% of our sales come from the bonbon case. And, we do have those consumers that come through that are like us, that, are just passionate about a bar of chocolate, and that's great, but it's not most people. Most people are after the bonbons. I think it's something about the American consumer.
Right. So before I ask you the next question, what I want to do is just recognize Lynn. One of the reasons why Lynn Bishop from Panama is because her father lives here in Prescott, and other Prescott-based friends. And so anecdotally, if you're going to be in a bean to bar manufacturing facility, one of the things that a retail location enables you to do, and one of the reasons why you should seriously consider it, even if you're not open 7 days a week, 9 hours a day, even if you're open just a couple of days a week, or even less often, depending upon your location, I know that many years ago, John and Kira's had a manufacturing facility in Philadelphia, and what they did is they did an outside the back door loading dock sale once a month. And so you could come to their loading dock on a Sunday once a month and you could buy anything, right? But that was the only retail that they had. But still, that connecting with the customer and understanding that one-to-one relationship, what they're responding to, what they're not responding to. I know that the way I talk about products has changed as a result of interacting with people. And so having that interaction is really important. As well as, most people here, and most people in most locations have no idea what craft chocolate is. And so being able to talk about what the ethos of craft chocolate is compared with big chocolate has been really important, I know, to many operations. But Jessica, you mentioned something which is really interesting, is you have a vegan facility which is dairy free, and yet you mentioned white chocolate. So tell me about white chocolate and how you produce something like that fits within the guidelines of what you're producing here.
Sure. So as not to confuse people, if I'm speaking about this in the retail store, I typically refer to it as a white style chocolate or a milk style chocolate. And I'm very clear that
I'm sorry to cut out. After white style of what?
Or a milk style chocolate. And that way it allows me to make it very clear that it's in that style and we're not using dairy milk, so as not to confuse people. For our white and our milk formulations, we substitute, maybe it's a blend of different nuts or oats or coconut, and we just base it off of the other flavors that will be in that particular chocolate, so as, not to create a dominating flavor. Like, it's not usually great to have your milk chocolate taste like an oatmeal cookie unless you're creating a flavor that is oatmeal cookie or something like that. So it allows us a lot of fun and creativity to play around with formulations and find out what closely mimics the creaminess of dairy without actually having dairy in there.
And then I noticed one of the things so this is, an approach. If somebody wants to do a type of chocolate that has the visual appearance of being a white chocolate or the visual appearance of being a milk chocolate, just generalizing, unless you want a particular flavor profile. So you mentioned, if I'm going to be using oat milk powder, for example, or actually refining real oats in a refiner into something, you're going to get something that tastes like an oatmeal cookie. That might work if you want to do a raisin inclusion or something like that, right? In terms of the bar. But if you're using a mix of different kinds of nuts, so for example, you might use unsweetened coconut, you might use cashew, you might use some other things, and then refining in flavored powders. How do you think about the sourcing of those kind of flavorings, right, that you're putting into the chocolates? Because I think that one of the challenges that many people have is, how am I going to go source these other ingredients other than cocoa beans and maybe cocoa butter, right, that I'm going to be adding, right, as inclusions or flavorings into my product? You guys do this for a living, right, in the NPD part of the business. How does that, what are some of the lessons that you can share with people who might be listening who are going, okay, I need these other things in terms of sourcing?
Do your due diligence. Don't just buy something because it got great reviews on Webstaurant Store or Amazon. Do your due diligence in the sense of sampling first, doing multiple trial batches. That way you can check to ensure you're getting consistency, and also get to learn and know your suppliers. And that's a really important thing, is develop a relationship with your suppliers, whether or not you're getting huge volumes or you're just getting, a handful of kilos per month. It will really help you get not only consistency, but quality and traceability in your products, so you can know that you're going to be getting what you're paying for and it's going to perform consistently in your products.
I'd also say just when you're looking for especially advanced ingredients, which we do a lot of work with, you go to your supplier and you ask them specific questions and try to get them to help you understand what you're working with. gone through the battle with pretty much every advanced ingredient in the market, and it continues to be a theme in our business that will inevitably do more and more and more. And it's just about learning how to use them, learning what temperatures are not good temperatures to get these ingredients to, but just really trusting your supplier and like working with them to understand what you're working with. That's really the best way to go about it. Try to get as much information before you start working with it. There's a lot of really intimidating ingredients out there, and expect there to be a lot of trial and error involved. I luckily benefited from companies with very large budgets that asked me to do this again and again and again, to the point where I felt like I was beating a dead horse, so to speak. But they would insist that they'd pay me more to do it again and do it again. And eventually I realized there is a future in this. So,
and expertise ensued.
I'm sorry, Jessica?
Expertise ensues.
Right. So if I can, I want to make another generalization and a connection. So earlier, Christian, you said trust your engineer, right? And part of what I would say that trust your engineer, a subtext of that is make the company that is providing you with the equipment part of the solution that you're looking for. Engage with the engineers and get them to solve your problems. And I think you're saying the same thing about your ingredient suppliers. By establishing a relationship, I mean, you're working with, very, very non-traditional sweeteners, for example, that have really odd characteristics, especially when you blend them. There are people who are coming to you that are looking for fat replacements and things like that just like don't look anything like cocoa butter, right? And these companies have application specialists whose job is to do nothing but help you figure out how to use their products properly because they want you to buy them. I mean, is that a fair characterization?
Oh, and they got a big budget to do it too. Like if you go to these places like the IFT show, half of the companies will
IFT standing for.
You want to help me with the acronym here? It's it's something with food technologies.
The FT is food technology. Yes, absolutely. All right. Yeah. So it's the international. It's not Association of Food Technologists, but it's something like that. Anyway, I wanted to interrupt.
They invent these acronyms faster than I can keep up with them. But nonetheless, these kinds of shows, you go to these events, and these companies have huge budgets. You ask them for, tagatose or whatever it is that they're selling, and they'll literally like overnight the sample to you on their dime. And I'm not saying to take advantage, but they obviously have a big budget to get these ingredients out into the market and get people working with them. So, I encourage chocolate makers to reach out to companies that can help you solve these kinds of problems. We deal with a lot of companies that come to us to try and solve little tiny problems that in a lot of cases they're not that difficult to solve.
Right. But because they're not chocolate manufacturing companies, they actually don't have any of the equipment or expertise to actually solve it for themselves. So they're looking for outside help to do that.
You'd be surprised how little experts really know in their field.
Well, okay. So thank you very much. And I don't know that's necessarily the place that we want to end the hour on, but we are at the close of the hour. Is there something that you'd like, either or both of you would like to end, like one, lesson that, I know that you guys had hoped to have your facility open by a particular time and it was delayed, pretty typical. But if there's one lesson that you think that as craft chocolate makers, you would, out of your experience over the last year or so that you've been working on this, that you'd like to share in closing?
I guess what I would start with is before you make your commitment to spending a lot of money on a lot of equipment that you really think you need, look at the alternatives. And I say that because, for example, chocolate tanks you could buy in the United States, you might end up paying 5 times what you could pay overseas for them. With machinery as well, we bought a depositor that's about 1/4 of the cost of a really good one. It works great. If you do your homework, you can save a lot of money, and that's what we do at Cacao Consulting. Is we help companies make decisions on manufacturing equipment, sometimes custom, sometimes stock, that can help them save a lot of money. And you'd be surprised how much you really need that money to be able to get your business going with marketing, with other things, with flooring surprises, HVAC surprises, electrical installations. That's another thing. Just, there's a lot of money that can be spent on putting in electrical drops to get your machinery working. So I would say really do your homework. If anybody ever wants a little bit of help, we're happy to take a call and even give free advice to people. Sometimes, we work as an agent a lot of the times to help them get machines. We got a machine line arriving and for a client of ours on the East Coast right now from Turkey. It's a complete custom line. And we did a lot of work in helping that client get something that they probably otherwise would have spent about 6 times the price. So, doing your homework and finding other solutions and not just going with something that a smooth talking salesman sold you, sometimes the best way to go.
Right. Yeah, you can come to us and we're the smooth talking salespeople. Anyway, Jessica, do you have something that you'd like to close out with? Out of your experience, again, from a new product development flavorist perspective, I think, because you're responsible in large part for what's in the bonbon case here.
I would say whether it's new product development or factory build out, plan for double the timeline that you initially anticipated. So make sure that you're able to financially support yourself. Make sure that you're not rushing into any rash decisions that seem convenient at the time but may end up biting you in the butt later. I think that's been a big learning for us, and I see with a lot of our co-manufacturing clients as well as consulting clients is don't rush a timeline. Really just take your time with it to ensure perfection, and that is the slow and steady wins the race always.
Yeah, I think that if there is an aspect of this that I see tripping people up, it's creating an artificial deadline. They say, "Oh, there's a trade show coming up. We need to be ready for it." Even if you're not ready for it, this becomes a challenge. So we're a little bit over the hour. I want to thank both of you, Jessica and Christian, for joining me here this morning. Hold on for just a second. What I want to do is I want to point out to everybody that this is the homepage of the Chocolate Life right now. You can go there. You can click through and you can look at today's live stream. I'm going to be putting a couple of links to some of the things that we've been talking about here, but you've got a link to the Cacao Consulting website, to the Orinoco Chocolate Life website, and then to the Chocolate Life Live episode that we did about 15 or 16 months ago with Christian about picking a co-manufacturing partner. So you can go and hit all those resources there. To remind people, if you are not yet a member, you can click on, there'll be a join button here. If you're not a member, please go and do that and support what it is that we're doing. And to say we're going to be doing another related topic a week from today. It's going to be also about starting a craft chocolate business. And my guest is going to be Dustin Cornett. People may remember Dustin as being the organizer of the Craft Chocolate Challenge. And so he's in a really, really interesting situation in a very small town and how it affected. So we're going to talk about the business decisions that, related to where you are located, right, are going to be a dictate what it is that you do. And that's going to be a week from today. Until then, again, thank you very, very much to everybody who has contributed comments. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And to like and comment and subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. I really appreciate that. And as I always do, which is if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.